Hello friends! Just here to give you a quick warning that this video references gore! If surgical procedures and autopsies make you feel squeamish, then you should probably sit this video out. You have been warned! Also, I'm using an untested character accent to read the story with. So if I accidentally offend anybody, I'm really sorry. That wasn't my intention. I'm just bad at voices sometimes. Anyways, please enjoy!
A doctor's memories. A scalpel was my first weapon. The professor had received the corpse of a ghastly creature from a band of adventurers. Prof managed to wake it up, whereforth it began to rampage. The creature dashed madly through the examining room, crashing into cabinets and smashing samples. The lab was absolutely trashed by the time we were able to subdue it. I was helping the professor perform the surgery on the creature at the time. Prof was attempting to reactivate the brain of the creature in order that I may distill some of its memories. I am not sure what went wrong for the creature to awaken, but before I knew, I was tossed onto my rear, and the professor had readied for combat. Prof had their hands out to their sides. Spheres of sickly lilac light had accumulated in each of their palms. Purple light was wisping from the professor's eyes like steam. The professor's eyes were locked onto the hostile beast. I was still green in my assistant training at the time, and I had not yet been in so much as a tussle. I was still working in the creature's spinal cord when it violently awoke. The beast's great mass knocked me to the ground as it lunged from the table. I landed on my rear, tossed like a rag towards the far wall. I raised my arm defensively and looked up to see the silhouette of the beast eclipsing the warm yellow examining light that hung from the ceiling. The form of the creature was hardly comprehensible. Its hide had been portioned into flaps that hung limply around its head and chest. The top of its skull had been removed, revealing its delicate, squishy brain beneath. Wires, medical instruments, and dissection tools still clung to the creature's flesh, sticking out from its form at every angle. "Huxton! Grab yourself a scalpel and help me deal with this fiend!" the professor yelled to me. "Yes, Prof," I responded, scrambling to my shaky feet. The scalpel I had been using on the creature's spine had not flown far from me. Towards it I lunged, scooping it up on my dash to a safer location. I positioned myself such that the professor was between myself and the beast. Prof fired orbs of crackling energy at the beast. Direct hit. The creature howled and reeled from the shock. "We need to take its head off!" the professor bellowed. "Yes, Prof. But won't that ruin the memory samples, Prof?" I responded. "Right now, the other samples are more important," replied the professor. "I suggest you make yourself useful soon, Huxton." "Yes, Prof. On it, Prof." During this conversation, the beast was shaking itself off. The flaps of hide slapped wetly against its flesh as it twisted. The instruments rattled along its form. Blood and aged fluids splattered onto the surfaces of the lab. Some of the instruments clattered to the ground and the examining table, where it had landed the front half of its form. I could only imagine the immense pain it must have been in, if it could still feel anything. The creature lunged blindly towards a wall, smashing samples and equipment under its bulk. Items which had been labelled and lined up so perfectly into cabinets by the professor and the other assistants. This memory still brings dismay to my heart, even to this day. "Give it a stab and direct its attention over to the other side of the room," the professor commanded, directing me towards an empty wall. "We can't risk losing any more samples." "Yes, Prof." I ran towards the bare wall, grabbing a tin tray and a pair of medical scissors on my way. "Oi, beast!" I screeched while rapping on the tray with the handle of the scissors. "This way!" Gliding towards my position in the room, the professor fired another pair of shots at the beast. It let out a terrible scream and turned towards us. Somehow I could see the rage and confusion in its shrunken, glazed eyes. The creature charged. Prof grabbed me by the back of my shirt and dragged me to a safer location. I watched the creature slam into the wall, managing to leave a bloody body print and a sizable dent in the structure. "I'm going to throw you at it now. You need to take hold of the creature and slice its spinal cord," the professor instructed me. "That should paralyze it." "Yes, Prof." I was still more dazed by the events unfolding than afraid. The professor lifted me under the arms, ready to throw. I held the scalpel tight in my beak, my hands ready to grab hold of the now blood-soiled hide. The beast recoiled and shook its head, splashing blood and other fluids against the wall and floor. It paused for a moment. Dazed, it looked around. Its pruning eyeballs locked onto us. It charged. The body barreled towards us. The professor stood their ground. The creature was a mere few feet in front of us before the professor reacted, but in an instant, we were beside it. The professor flung me towards the raging beast. My hands struggled to find purchase on the blood-slickened fur, but only for a moment. I climbed up the creature's body, towards the back of its neck where I had been working, minding the flaps of hide that I had opened, and the slippery flesh now exposed. Using some of the flaps and incisions as footholds, I inched my way along its spine. Blood, bile, and spinal fluid coated the front of my clothing as I crawled. My face and beak were assaulted by the sickly sweet smell of fermented flesh. The gap that had opened in my beak as I held tight to the scalpel allowed for the sickly fluids to splash into my mouth. At this time, I had ranked the taste as the worst I had ever experienced, but since then, I have tasted many equally horrible and worse medical concoctions created by myself and my peers. Steadily, I inched towards the back of the creature's neck for what felt like far too long, as the creature raged around the room. Eventually, I did make it to the section of hide that I had opened before working on its spine. I yanked the scalpel from my beak and plunged it between the vertebrae. The beast's back legs gave out, but it was still charging. The blade was far too small for the first stab to cut the cord completely, so I sliced more carefully into the column, shearing through tendons and ligaments. Finally, the blade sank deep enough to sever the rest of the cord. The beast's front half crashed to the ground, its jaw slamming onto the tile floor. I held my grip as the creature and I came cascading towards the earth. We landed. I sat back on the creature's neck for a few moments. My hands would not let go, and my mind was reeling. "Huxton, you mad creation, you!" The professor cheered as they approached. "You did excellently!" I could hear the sound of the creature's head licking and slurping. It tried to summon a snarl, but its lungs, along with the rest of its body, laid unresponsive, paralyzed. "Well, I suppose we should put this creature to rest finally," said the professor, as they readied a glowing purple charge in their hand. They extended it towards the creature's brain, and let loose a blast that sent brain matter flying, coating what little of the lab and ourselves that remained clean. Finally, the creature fell silent and still. "Let's go get a meal to celebrate," suggested the professor. I could hardly stomach the idea of food or drink while the taste of the creature's blood remained in my mouth. I obliged, however, relieved that the ordeal was over.
Hello again. Thank you guys so much for watching and for sticking through that. Have a wonderful rest of your day, night, or whatever time it happens to be. And I hope you consider liking and subscribing. That would mean a lot to me. Anyways, enjoy the rest of your time. Bye now.